At the height of his career, artist Anthony Lister was an unstoppable force. Global exhibitions, major commissions, and a Netflix documentary, rising out of graffiti culture to become arguably the biggest name to emerge from the Australian scene. But in March 2020, everything changed.
One of Australia's best-known street artists remains behind bars after being accused of sexually assaulting 4 women.
His home was raided by police and he was charged with multiple counts of rape, sexual assault, and indecent assault following allegations made by several women. Some of you might remember at the time I made a video report covering the case outlining the allegations that were already available in the public domain. Ultimately, that video was a drop in the ocean of a much larger media storm, but still it felt close. I knew Lister. We had filmed together in Berlin and Hong Kong, and he was one of the first guests that I invited onto the Juxtaposed podcast. After the charges were laid, we exchanged messages privately, and I told him, if what you're saying is true, I'll update the story when the time comes. 6 years later, after trials and retrials, every single charge brought forward against Anthony Lister has resulted in a not guilty verdict. In the eyes of the law, he has been cleared. After quite a significant back and forth, we have now agreed to sit down for a long-form interview, which for me felt like the most honest way I could follow through on my commitment. I've approached this conversation with the intention of being fair and fully aware of the wider cultural context in which it sits. The Me Too movement represented a necessary and overdue cultural shift, empowering women to come forward and hold powerful men like Harvey Weinstein to account. We're also speaking at a time when public trust in institutions, media, justice systems feels increasingly fragile. In the UK alone, more than 70,000 cases of rape were reported to the police in 2024, with only 2.7% resulting in charges. These are sobering facts that frame any kind of discussion like this. This is not an attempt to retry a case, an independent jury has already done that, nor is it an attempt to collapse a complex cultural moment into a single narrative. It's simply an attempt to hold space for a difficult conversation.
Hey, Doug.
Anthony Lister. What did you have for breakfast today? I'm just going to do a quick audio check.
What did I have for breakfast today? I had cereal. That was it. And then I tried to catch some of the news, but all I could see was war.
Yeah, that's all you're going to see at the moment.
Right? I think that's planned.
Is that better than seeing yourself in the news?
Oh yeah, come on now, shivers. No, actually, I'd rather see myself in the news these days. But that was also planned. They love a villain. They just don't like, to say that they were wrong. That's fun.
When was the last time you were on the news, and did it feel different?
Well, the last time I was on the news, it was bad. Last time I was in the news, it was quiet, but it was accurate. I was glad. I mean, there was a lot of news cameras at the trial for my acquittal, but none of them published anything that they took photos of.
Why do you think?
I don't think it was in their interest. I think I don't know why they're instructed to do that, but even the judge himself said something along the lines of, I'd hope that Mr. Lister would be reported on as he was initially, the same sort of coverage or at least exposure, but that wasn't the case.
In a really candid way, what do you think drives that?
I really look. I mean, that's staying outside of all sorts of fanciful conspiracy theories about who the news is run by and what the police have to do with influencing the media and their connections. I would say that it has just got to do with Schadenfreude and what sells news, and I don't think the headline, not a rapist, is as gripping as could be a rapist.
You'd like to think that they were driven by a quest for the truth, right?
You would think that would absolutely be a journalist's primary objective.
I'm going to ask questions. This is all. They're there to be asked. If you feel uncomfortable with anything I'm talking about for whatever reason, whether it's personal or whether it's legal, it's completely on you whether or not you answer or how you answer it. But I'm just going to ask the questions, but I want you to, to feel comfortable throughout this, even though, it might potentially be uncomfortable for you, although I don't know where you sit with it at the moment, but we'll kind of get to there. What does What does a sort of day in the life of Anthony Lister look like at the moment?
At the moment, it's starting to get back to I'd like to say normal. But for the last 6 years, it's been really unusual. It's been really unusual. But a usual day in the life is, wake up in the morning, eat some breakfast, check on my kids, check on my business, and then get to the studio, and then have lunch, and then catch up with meetings, and then finish the day in the studio, and then go home, and then feed animals and check on kids again, through whatever means, telephones or if they're around, and then and go to bed, usually around midnight.
So you're in a productive rhythm? Are you in a place where, the storm has calmed a little bit, or is there still a storm?
No, I'd like to think that the storm has calmed. There's no police interactions. There's no troll sort of trolls attacking my web identity or anything like this anymore at the moment. So yeah, it's pretty calm. It's pretty normal. I think it was muscle memory, basically keeping my practice active and my studio practice like alive through all of this like turmoil and stillness. So yeah, I'm always productive, but I think that's muscle memory.
I got the sense from just the sort of the scale of interactions between us, particularly from yourself in the last couple of months, that this, whatever it was, whether it was, like I said, an update, or for me, what worked better was an interview, but I got the sense that that was something that was quite important for you. And I guess, given that my contribution feels like quite a small drop in the ocean, I want to know why. And before we kind of get into everything, if there's anything that you want to address, from the start, anything you want to kind of get off your chest at this point.
Oh, look, I mean, I wrote to several journalists who made a point of making a point of when the explosion happened, which was 2020, and my being charged with these heinous, disgusting crimes. I felt a personal connection to you, and I felt like you understood me better than others, because other journalists were just kind of, it was all hearsay, but I felt like we actually had a friendship, a connection, or at least a knowledge of each other, more so than other journalists. So I didn't expect anything from the other journalists, which obviously didn't bother chasing up. So I felt like you would be best to tell, or at least inform our community, because that's basically who you're a speaker for, or somewhat a journalist. You are a journalist for, in my eyes. So, and you do a good job. So I really felt like chasing you up.
I appreciate that. How much of the case can we talk about?
No, we can go anywhere, except for the accusers' names, which we can refer to as their initials if you'd like, or as numbers, but just out of begrudged respect for them, and also out of respect for the law, I wouldn't mention their names.
We'll start at midway through 2020. You were arrested, not for the first time, but for the first time in kind of the situation that we're talking about. The charges were presented to you as rape, sexual assault, and indecent assault. Is that right?
Yeah.
What was that moment like for you, and can you recount the experience? And I know you'll have gone through this in other interviews and other channels, but I think it's important for me to, not rely on those interviews to formulate an opinion.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so it was the morning of March 10th, 2020, and I'd been out to dinner with my son for his birthday the night before. I'd just returned from Japan, like a week and a half earlier. I'd been in my home for 3 days since I opened a show in Wollongong, my first regional museum show, my first museum show, which actually, officially embraced me into the institutions of public galleries. And so that was about to be touring. I'd somewhat become an adult in my own mind, having worked so hard in the industry to actually finally be institutionally recognized. Little did I know the institution that was paying most attention to me was the law, or at least the police and the prison. So I had 12 men with submachine guns, kicking my door literally. And I woke up to that sound, and then I was just thrown on the floor, and it was just police search warrant, and so they all jumped on me. They take turns of jumping on you, and then I was dragged downstairs to see my son had already been jumped on several times, and I had no idea what any of this was for, and so I wasn't thinking anything. Actually, I was thinking, is this graffiti related? This is ridiculous.
You had an experience in Japan, didn't you? Like, what, a week before, 2 weeks before? Did you assume that these were connected?
No, I did not assume they were connected at all. But I mean, I was shocked because they happened in completely different ways. So, in Japan, the reason I spent 3.5 weeks in Japan, which was only supposed to be a trip for a show, I was arrested and put in prison in Japan for graffiti, which in Japanese translates to destroying a building. So that was the night of Barry McGee's show, and I was on my way there when I was doing a painting on a wall and was absolutely just bum rushed by these police, and myself and my photographer were thrown in prison for like 3.5 weeks in Japan. So and that was a whole experience in itself. Yeah. So I thought, okay, well, actually, going back to the arrest, I was told when an officer walks in with plain clothes that I was being arrested for sexual assault, and I was just dumbfounded. I'm like, he's like, you're coming with us. Do you want to do an interview? I'm like, absolutely, let's do this. So I squashed this. And so I did this interview, went for a long time, and I explained everything. Obviously, my explanations were just my version of the truth. Having done that, I was put in a cell and then taken to prison, where I spent 3.5 weeks in prison, which was really, really bad. It blitzed anything comparable to Japan.
Can you maybe describe the difference then? And when you say prison, maybe what's the difference between prison, jail?
Okay, so jail is like a watch house, or like a fish tank or something, where you just sit there and you wait to be processed, and then you go to court that day or something. Prison is like you get put on a transport vehicle, which best described as like if you could empty everything out of your fridge and get inside your fridge for an hour or two. It's as cold as that, and it's as small as that. Anyway, so you get taken to a prison where there are actual criminals that have actually hurt people, that are in there for a long time, and they don't have any money, and they don't care, and they don't. I mean, the charges I was in there for, they're the sort of charges, and I was in like the kind of prison where people get hurt, and like hurt as in when you hear helicopters, that means they're coming to pick up a body, and you hear helicopters regularly. Okay, so my charges were ugly, and shit, like it's not pretty, and I don't at all. I'm innocent of all these charges. Like I'm not I'm not the, like, I know that I break laws when I make art and things, but I'm not an abuser in any way. I don't hit people. I don't hurt people. I don't enjoy people being in pain. And so to describe prison in the comparison between Japan and Australia, in Australia, there's a shower in your cell. You're in a cell with another person, and it's pretty much the same size as in Japan. But in Japan, you have 4 people in a cell, and there's no shower. Or in Japan, you shower on Thursdays. And my name in Japanese jail is Juhachiban, which is number 18. I wrote a small book while I was in there, because I found also in Australia, I found myself just writing rather than drawing. I was writing, and partly because you're actually not allowed to draw in prisons. I'm not sure if anyone is aware of that, but if you get sort of caught drawing, definitely in Japan, they'll take your your stuff away. But even in Australian prison, I was told that I wasn't allowed to draw.
Can you shed some light on that? Why?
I have no idea. I asked why, and in Japan it was. I mean, they didn't speak any of the language, so it was just like, no. It was they didn't even say no. They were just words I didn't understand, and things were taken away from me. In Australia, I was just my pens were taken away from me. This is after actually I was. I mean, there are stories, that I've written down and can recall, but there are intimate stories even about the pens in which I used in each jail to the detail of such that, like in Japan, they've engineered the pens to be so that only just the tip, and I mean like a millimeter, I don't even know what that is in an inch, but like a fingernail length is actually protruding from the actual pen. So you have to write exactly directly vertically in order to write anything. In Australia, my pen experience was that I had two, and I gave one to my cellmate, who was a 22-year-old, a very disturbed boy who eventually, because I'd said that I did smoke cigarettes on the outside, that he took that indication upon himself to order cigarettes inside the jail and then let me know that I owed the person who was bringing the cigarettes $180, which I disagreed with. It just wasn't what the story was. Anyway, that followed several days, if not a week, of him following me in the yard and gaining a group of people together, which resulted in me at one point turning around and saying, "Look, who are the boys? Who's going to pump me?" And he's like, "I'm the boys. I'm going to pump you." And he proceeded to thrust a pen at my throat, which did connect with my throat as I held it. And I say to him, "This is over $180, And he's like, "Yes, cunt, this, that." And so that's how I was extorted in jail by a 22-year-old with a pen who stabbed me in the throat.
Was that just because he saw a window?
That was because I owed him $180 for cigarettes that I never ordered.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Did he just see a window for extortion, or was there a personal relationship there?
No, there was no personal relationship at all. It was just an opportunity for extortion.
Did that feel like a recurring theme for you?
No, it wasn't. It didn't go on any more than that, and I didn't have another experience like that. But except for with my legal team, who extorted me substantially. Yeah, I actually, as opposed to the approach of my lawyers at the time, I would have preferred a more upfront, assault kind of situation, because it made sense to me. It wasn't such a betrayal.
How much faith did you have in who was, supposed to be looking after you? And some of the numbers that were involved in this are pretty crazy.
Crazy. Yeah. Look, yeah, I had to trust these lawyers, and I had no reason to not trust them, even though I'd done some research. But really, I was a what is it? A deer in the headlights. I had no idea. I'd never been through anything like this, and I had nobody watching out for me. And I mean, who, it was. The only way to describe it is extortion, really. The sort of numbers, and when they asked to me, like, or not asked me, when I was instructed to give them these sort of numbers, yeah, it's nothing short of an absolute, conspiracy, between a group of people to take me and my house and my reputation. And I'm sure they were certain that I would be put in prison, and I'm also certain that there was collusion between the police and my lawyer. It's just disgusting.
Why would they collude?
Why would they? Yeah, so they saw me as a threat to society in the eyes of, like, being in my mind, my ability to communicate to society. Like, the artwork that I was making was okay. So I was poking the bear. I was teasing the beast, which is the police, with the artwork that I was making. And I've learned since that it's best to not do that at the level I was doing it. The level I was doing it was like there's a festival, and I was given a budget, and with that budget, I bought a car that was the same shape as a police car, and I had the roof crushed in, and I put and then I bought a ton boulder, and put that in on the roof. And I mean, that was just a number of pieces. Also, you know, I'd had footage of a piece that I'd done in Los Angeles with Risk and Sunny and Dax, and it was a big F the Police painting the night that the NWA movie came out. So I had a, you know, anti-authoritarian vein about me that the police definitely um, were wanting, you know, see punished. And also there was that Netflix film where the police were kind of put on show and and made to look a bit stupid by the editor. In the movie, have you seen the listers? So that's, you know, and that was worldwide, a movie that went out. So there's a number of reasons why the police would have reason to have beef with me. The lawyer, I think he was just, you know, paid to go along with it.
You had a case where one officer, was it two officers, were reprimanded because of treatment against you?
It's interesting that the dates, how they how they coincidentally are the same date, but a year earlier. So I was I was doing some artwork in a bus shelter, which I had the key for, and these plainclothes officers, which I later was to learn they were plainclothes officers, they just looked like graffiti kind of like Bronx that wanted my spray paints, because they jump out of the car and they give us your paint. So I give them my paint, and then they're like, "What else have you got?" Insinuating like, "Do you have a key or whatever?" But I just took that as a moment to run. So I ran from these police, and I ran quite a way, and one of them was fast, and so we stopped running at the same time. I stopped, and he stopped. He's like, "We're police." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I said, like, "You're fast," and he's like, "Yeah, you're fast." And so we're kind of having somewhat of a joke about it, but as absolutely puffed. And that was when the bigger officer, he catches up and he absolutely whacks me in the head like King hits me.
Maybe on your back. Yes, sir. Yes, of course. Yeah. Yes, of course. You want me to run from police?
And I'm unconscious, like basically I just hit the ground. And that was when a person in the public, somebody I didn't know, a random person walking past, just thought, "Wow, that's it's like something's going to pop off here. This is ridiculous." So he starts recording, and that's why I have a recording of it. And so that led to, I mean, them putting my head through the back of the car, which is ridiculous because it's a metal car and there's a hole in the car. So my head was just absolutely smashed.
What the fuck? Please sit down.
And then I was whatever, that arrest happened. I was charged for having a graffiti implement, but in charging of having a graffiti implement, this film was shown, and the judge was disgusted by the police's just assault on me, and so he he said that they'd used excessive force. So then my lawyer at the time wrote a letter, and the letter got to them, and they were reprimanded on the 10th of March 2019. And now that date is the same date except for a year before my raid. So it was like, yeah, a year later to the day, I was charged with just all these terrible crimes. So I mean, if someone was of a mind where they think, okay, things are planned and grudges are held and organized, then one, you know, could be led to believe that, you know, the police planned for a year or somehow to get me in a way that would really get me, which is, I mean, how do you defend yourself against like sexual assault? I mean, it's such an intimate situation that you're in with, like, you know, like between two people, and you know, it can always be different, you know, how one is intimate with one person is to another. So these are like that basically it's scary business when you talk about assault sexually and intimacy and the nature of somebody. You know, character references and interviews, they only go so far. When the lights are off, it's a different story. And that's why I don't I can't blame anybody for you know, really just thinking that this news that was coming out was any incarnation other than the fact, because how do you defend these things? So this is really how they plan to nail me to the wall, which they did, and I was nailed to the wall. I just so happen to have just through the fortune of just the grace of the Lord, I had enough actual factual evidence to prove that I was just not these things during the times when they were. It's a miracle that I'm sitting here, Doug. Really, it is.
How much of this then in your sort of experience, your very close personal experience with this now, is based around character over evidence?
Well, it's all based on hearsay, really, because the cases of sexual assault rely on recollections of moments when people are intimate with each other. So my version of anything to do with the truth, which can only be determined based on facts, it was irrelevant. I thought I'd go down and explain everything and then be able to go home and continue on with my life for a day at least. Not at all. Really, it's just it's scary. It's scary that fictitious uh like not even rumors, like these are actual lies. They were actually lies. And so yeah, look, my character fit the bill. I was a law breaking, it would appear, um member of societies, around the world, where I was traveling in and out, and it looked like I was having a great time. I guess I was having a time, but I was also being a bit careless with my judgment of people and their and also I was a little more promiscuous than probably not necessary, but then it was favored by some of the complainants, because I did have broken some hearts. It's true, and I mean, I'm no playboy, or I am not even very attractive or young or anything like that. I just I just fitted the bill, I guess.
One of the biggest sort of indicators of that story, and actually one of the reasons that I ended up covering it, well, I mean, look, I can get into why I covered it, because it was, there was a cultural moment, but it was significant. It wasn't insignificant that this, and I don't want to say that one person making this claim is insignificant, but they have a hell of a lot harder of a journey to go through than 6 or 7. And there was multiple people coming out at this point. Now, where did that come from?
These people were found and coerced by one individual, as a matter of fact. And it was an old friend of mine who I'd known for 14 years, who I'd never been intimate with ever.
So you say coerced. Was this proven? Is there a transcript available or something like that for this?
No, this was yeah. Is it proven? Look, there are messages to prove it. It wasn't admitted in law, because really, when it came down to it, in the case, all that was important was me having my freedom. We weren't interested in proving anybody being a conspiracy, or we weren't going for any kind of contempt of court or perjury or anything to do with that. Really, it was just a matter of getting me free, because there were such big charges. And was it a coincidence? No. Was it organized? Yes. Is there proof of that? Yes. Was it proven in court? No.
I'm just trying to get a sense of, if you make a claim like that, can I trace this back to somewhere, to a point in something that I can show and say, yes? Because if you say something like they colluded, you understand why that should be challenged and probed.
Absolutely, it should be. And I would. It's not that I'd love to. I would be happy to show the evidence, and even a map. Some sort of web, in order to describe this, because that's exactly how it needed to be unpacked in order for myself to understand it. My fiance at the time was helping piece it together for me. Actually, while I was actually in prison, just based on her involvement with the social interactions with me online through this girl. And really, I mean, it seems I wouldn't want to say people are jealous of things like this because it's just some sort of high, you know, uppity ego thing. But yeah, this person and her coercion they were she was in particular extremely motivated and extremely convincing. And I might add that a lot of people were paid from this. So all of the complainants were paid tens of thousands of dollars for being involved.
Who paid them?
It's called a victims of crime compensation. There was a girl that wasn't that got thrown out of the case earlier on because these things needed to be proven, and they didn't want to go to court without actual without what they thought was strong cases. So I was put in prison on the merit of the claims that were made, accusations that were made against me, which were proven to be false and like absolutely fanciful, just lies, and by two girls that were taken down there, and they were later removed from the case. And then the rest of these girls that came forward were actually inspired by the news, and then talking with this girl who had started a group chat, and was recruiting haters of Anthony Lister, and just girls that had I guess more time than they had money and wanted to see me go down. It's sad, it's disgusting, and it's unbelievable, but it happened.
How much do you think then wider culture, wider society at the time played into not just the reporting of your case, but the maybe the motivations, maybe the reasons why people would be so, as you say, so motivated to come in and sort of join these WhatsApp groups or start WhatsApp groups? We're kind of like talking 2019, 2020. This is the sort of the height of a global cultural awakening, both with, we're seeing Me Too, we're seeing Black Lives Matter at the time. People felt really angry with the way that the world was, and they wanted to hold people in power to account. To what extent do you think that this shaped perception?
No, I absolutely can see it. I mean, there was a period of time there, and it still exists, where there is a not a willingness, but there is a motivation to exactly hold people accountable for the legacy of power, which has been used improperly over time. And I completely can see that. I mean, there's in Australia, this place was taken over by white settlers in 1788, and eventually somewhere along the line, Prime Minister said that he was sorry, and that was a big deal for them to say sorry for actions of people that they didn't know and had nothing to do with. So accountability doesn't just come from those who are directly involved in in mistakes or actions from the past, but it gets passed on to governments. When it gets passed on to, I mean, if for example, I mean, obviously I'm white, and mostly, and obviously I was at the time successful, and appeared somewhat rich, and so a rich successful white guy who's running around writing on walls, and then making artwork about police. Look, I mean, it was easy to paint me like a villain.
I mean, there was a little more to your character at that point than that. I mean, I know that there was the writing on walls was the driving force, but there was a sort of like there's other guys that were writing on walls, right? But there was a certain rock star element of the Lister brand, right? It was the partying, it was the kind of the unhingedness of it, and there was an element from the outside looking in. You may not have felt this, but from the outside looking in, that was what was presented. So it wasn't quite just as flattened as writing on walls. There was more of a persona than that.
Absolutely. I was I definitely was not shying away from, the bad boy of art at all. I was definitely more leaning into it than otherwise. And I have done for I had did I for the majority of my career. Upper Playground books were published in 2007, and there's plates of cocaine and people being crazy and lifting their shirts up and things like this. Um, absolutely, I don't doubt that at all.
I'll go back to kind of like the middle because we kind of ultimately know how it ends. But you were denied bail initially, right? So you've had guys with machine guns. You've been denied bail. The severity of all this is starting to kind of like come up on you. Did you have faith in the way that this was going to pan out? Did you understand the severity of it all at this point, right?
Point that I was arrested, no, no. I thought that I would tell them what happened and I would go home. Yes, at some point, absolutely, the severity of it. I mean, really, if I had been found guilty, if I actually had have done any of these charges, I would be in prison for no less than 14 years. That's your whole life. I mean, and I'm very aware of the severity of the charges. And I had faith in the fact that the truth would out. Um, and I that's what kept me alive, Doug. Honestly, if I'd done any of this stuff, and because I mean the lawyers that I eventually found me, um, they're not the type of lawyers. You don't lie to lawyers. You just don't lie. You just don't. It doesn't serve you any good. So I mean, honestly, if I was any incarnation of an abuser who was going to see himself do 14 years in a place that I saw as hell, look, I would have I've got children and things to live for, but really, there's no life in 14 years in jail for me as a sexual abuser. I would have necked myself, mate.
When I made that video, or when I did that report on you, it was the first time I'd felt really. I have, and I said this to you, over Instagram. Like I have thought about that a lot, and it felt like a real turning point for me because of the proximity, the closeness, the fact that we have worked together, and the
Yeah.
severity of what was going on and what you were facing. I made that. I felt like it was the right thing to do because because it just felt like the right thing to do at the time. I was breaking this. It wasn't, I was trying to inflame it. It's just that I was reporting on what was already out in the ether. And it felt like it was coming from an honest place. But there was a point at which I thought, if you had not made it, and this is really selfish for me to say, given that you're the one that's going through this experience, I thought, how would that sit on me, knowing that I contributed somewhat to the noise around that? And that was genuinely a kind of a heavy thought.
Sure, but I mean, and also it seems selfish of me to be thinking of myself during all of this because there are actual, there are people that have been assaulted that um, these laws are in place to actually persecute and actually and protect, which I back 100%. I've got two daughters. I was raised by a mum who was raised by a single mum, so it's like in no way am I trying to deflect or take away from people who feel who have been assaulted. I think go straight to the police. I think do go the whole hog to get people that are dangerous in society, sexually against women and children out of society. There's no place for that. And I understand. And it was shocking. And the news was it was shocking. I mean, they were at my house with cameras. It made world news, and it was headline news. I thought when this is over, this is going to make me stronger. Not only mentally, but also in my practice, because I'll come out, I'll be vindicated for being having weathered this storm, which I didn't think would go on for so long. But actually, when it came down to it, the reporters, there was just a dead silence, and I mean that's a story in itself, really.
But you understand from the other perspective, from sort of wider society, why there is a sort of an appetite not to not to vindicate men, but to make sure that we acknowledge collectively how hard it is for victims of rape to be able to bring justice to their to the perpetrators of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, in the moment, I can see that it doesn't, you know, it must be confusing. And, you know, the charges that were put against me were, they were from like many years ago. And I mean, they were just, they were not true. And these were, you know, mostly scorned lovers, who found an opportunity to band together through this one woman.
I mean, I've got scorned lovers, but they've not taken me to court. Like how scorned are we talking here?
Well, only as I guess, you know, they were as scorned as I was, having had something to be able to have taken from me. So I'd bought a house. I had, you know, I was traveling the world. I was going to art fairs and, you know, hanging out with Jeff Koons and sharing it on my stories and things like this. And, you know, I had a beautiful fiance. And I guess it was, you know, there was, I guess, being in the face always of somebody. I mean, I don't have that kind of begrudging feeling towards ex-lovers. Um, but yeah, it's the only explanation, honestly, because when it comes down to it, I mean, the police knew the facts. They took all of my hard drives, and I just so happened to have documented all of my life. I mean, it sounds hard to believe, but when the police came up, when they were questioning themselves, um, you know, they said that they didn't even weren't even able to get through all of the footage of the evidence that I you know, procured through my life. Not to say they didn't find the obvious indications early on, but they were hoping that I wouldn't find them or be able to actually activate them because of either being in prison. Because if I was in prison for this whole time, I wouldn't have never been able to produce the defense, which I was able to through subpoenas and, you know, really, really difficult circumstances.
One of the biggest defining factors for you was this like ridiculous amount of documentation. I mean, even in the run up to this interview, you sent me about 40 emails with, you know, screenshots and videos and everything like that. So you know, I believe that you document the shit out of everything. If it was the other way around, how would a woman prove the other way?
I mean, my mother won't let me even talk to anybody without a waiver form type thing. I mean, I'm not saying it literally, but you know, I'm definitely more protected these days. And as far as my daughters go and educating them and you know, as far as like what if they found themselves in the circumstances and what my advice would be, not that I have been sexually assaulted or have sexually assaulted anybody, but I'd say act on it immediately, or at least, or if it's just going to be of your word. But text messages play such a large role in it. You know, the you don't say to somebody in messages to another friend, because everything comes out in court. Everything, and you got to understand, like it's just not messages between myself and a complainant that comes out through my phone, because my phone, I don't delete anything, but it's messages to everybody at the time. So, you know, this one particular, I'll say, lady, said to her friend, after she left my house immediately, she said something like, "Oh, it was the best experience of my life. He didn't even try to fuck me." Like, okay, so to assume that I would be trying to fuck her for starters is ridiculous, because I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know, but that's the sort of a message which would, and then also sticking my stickers onto her laptop, and then you know, being my friend, but then also when it was convenient for her, being somewhat you know, suspicious of me when that when majority of any conversation would lean towards, is he, is he a nice guy, or is he a dangerous guy, or is he a bad guy, or I don't know. People like rumors, and everyone's interested in everyone's amused, not everybody, but we would find in society that most people are more amused by people's, entertained by their misfortune than they are of their pleasant nature.
How that's used, and again, maybe this is an unfair, conversation, but it's just like how you can have these texts, you can put stickers on a laptop, you can say, I can't believe he was such a nice guy, he didn't even try to fuck me. But you could be married, but if you say no at the moment, you say no.
No means no. No always means no. No always means no. Body language means, no. A pull away means no. I mean, there's, my word doesn't. I know that there's no point, trying to convince anybody of anything through words. But having said that, and keeping in mind everything before the but's bullshit, I'm not, and I have never been a forceful interactor of anything intimate. If anything, it's the opposite. I'm just, it's just blown my mind to think that anybody could think that I am that person if they've ever met me. And I'm not a kind of quiet guy with things like that. I've taken on conversations that have been confronting, and not confrontational, but definitely of a nature where things are unpacked, because I'm 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 every which way but loose. You know what I mean? I'm definitely not loose, and I'd say loose would be thinking you didn't hear no when you heard no. No always means no.
One of the other interviews you did, in fact, I think it was the only long form one, was with Benita Ardent.
Yeah, Bettina Ardent.
She heavily uses the term manufactured rape crisis across her channel. Do you see yourself as a victim of a manufactured rape crisis?
No, I'm not gonna go into me being a victim of anything. These are experiences, and whether I was targeted or anything was manufactured, it's not my place to kind of take strength in that. I don't care to be a victim or a survivor or anything like that. I'm just a dude that had a bad experience with the law, and who let too many loose women into my life, and it almost wrecked my life, and took me away from my children. That's that's what I'm really sorry for. I'm really sorry for not having better, stronger hindsight ability at the time. For my children, I'm sorry for my children, because they almost lost me.
I think that's a good place to open up that conversation. I mean, this must have been a really life-changing moment for them, or not just moment, sorry, series of moments.
Yeah.
How are they?
Look, I'm gonna say they're doing well. My daughter Lola, she, throughout all of this chaos, finished high school, started university, finished university, here in Sydney at the National Art School, and with my last name. She's the example of health and strength, and she's like the she's amazing. Lola Lister. She's a ceramicist, sculptor, and painter. And I don't know how she did it, because really, and there were times when I wouldn't go to her group shows and things like this, and she preferred it that way, and it was just due to the amount of attention that it would get, and that I kind of that was around me. And that's hard. I mean, I went to her graduation, and at the time I was on house arrest, because there were a number of arrests. I was arrested 15 times in the last 5 years, and these are from like breaches of bail by because I do have a compulsion to write on walls, and it's not just writing on walls like saying stupid or graffiti even. there was a situation here in Sydney where a police officer had shot dead two men during a Mardi Gras, maybe two Mardi Gras ago, and it was all over the news, and it was all on. They were at the front of their house and things like this, and I happened to have a crayon in my pocket, and I did a basic drawing of a kind of a stick man shooting and a couple of other stick men like this, and he had a badge on and a hat. I wasn't trying to make the news. I wasn't trying to make anything other than like illustrate what was on the cover of all of the newspapers. But anyway, long story short, they came to my house and arrested me for that, and that was a breach of bail, and I happened to be put on house arrest for 24 hours, so I couldn't even get food, whatever. No worries. I'm not saying I had a hard time. I dealt with these things. But during that time, my daughter graduated, and at the graduation, there was plainclothes officers like with guns, not making themselves known at all, being very covert, and just making sure that because I had to actually arrange it with the courts for me to go to my daughter's graduation, that I left on time because they were just really chewing at the bit to get anything on me in order to put me in prison for my trial, or at least like for, to have my bail actually squashed, so I would not be able to defend myself or visit my lawyers. And that was the flimsy ground that their case was on, based on the facts that they knew that they were hoping that I would not be able to present in a court of law, and did everything in their power to actually, yeah, stop me from being able to present myself and my case in court of law. It's like I said, it's a miracle that I'm here, Doug. Okay, so my daughter is 15. My younger daughter, she's just been accepted into circus school, so she's in the Australian flying fruit flies school, which only has 50 students and applicants all year long. So we're really proud of her. So that's fantastic. So she's living with my ex-wife, her mother in Albury, and my son, he's doing his early 20s, just being a beautiful, fun guy, and playing it pretty safe thanks to my circumstances.
I was going to ask, 20-year-old guy, is there a little Anthony there?
There absolutely is, absolutely, and so luckily he's got an older Anthony to see how how things can go terribly wrong terribly quickly.
What did being cancelled? You're a cancelled man. What did that look like to you?
Well, it wasn't a Johnny Depp experience, that's for sure. On the outset of it, there's no sparklers or uncanceledness that went along with it. But so I'm not sure how long cancelled actually exists for. But I had to embrace it, and being a creative, I embraced it in the sense that there was an opportunity for me to see the other side of, or that side of life. So I made t-shirts and embraced the canceledness. To walk down the street one day and have people stop and introduce their mothers to you, and invite you in for a free coffee and a free meal or whatever, to being really almost crossing the road, definitely not looking you in the eye. It's a challenge, Doug. It's a real challenge to go from such heights of in people's minds to such lows. But I think what kept me sane was I've kind of always had a healthy, I'd say realistic approach to hype, and there's been no time when, if at any moment I'd been something which I thought that I wasn't. I don't and never have put myself on any kind of pedestal, as far as outside of my own self-worth. So look, I don't hold grudges, and I don't blame people for being apprehensive with their opinions, given my opportunity to be able to prove myself. So which everybody is, everybody needs to your own respect. It's not just given. I believe yeah, so I think in doing so, I should maintain a stable lifestyle.
How do you feel about the impact the case had on the women?
Well, I would hope that it would, uh, look, I don't think it would have, I don't know for certain. I've not talked with them. These were people that were I consider to be good, close friends. So I actually feel, feel, I don't feel bad that they lost what their intention or endeavors were to take me down. I don't know why I feel a sense of compassion towards them, really. Every instinct that I should have, I somehow unnaturally don't, um, should be that they, they're liars and they try to destroy me and they should, rot, they should rot. Um, but I can't help but to feel like I feel embarrassed somewhat, and for them, and I feel like they were misled and they were coerced by this girl. So I really put the onus on this individual who had contact with all of them and actually walked them all down. That's how much interaction this girl had with these people. Um, so how do I think it impacted them? Uh, I'm not allowed to know. I don't know. How can I imagine it impacted them? Um, I would say significantly. They invested a large amount of their time into it, which they were paid for. So, but money doesn't pay for things. Then it doesn't pay it doesn't pay for feelings. It doesn't pay for the time invested. Look, I should hope that they should feel significantly um, ashamed of what they attempted to do to me, for reasons that are unwarranted next to the kind of impact that it had on me and my family. And I have to be like that. No, I do feel like that. Um, it was very nasty. It was very, very nasty pieces of work.
The jury eventually came to a verdict pretty quickly for a resounding not guilty. Why do you think that was so quick? Do you feel in the public perception, the legal system has told you that you're not guilty, but in the eyes of the public, do you think that that's got the same kind of connection?
Well, I mean, the jury is the public. So the jury is like 12 members of society that I don't know, that I'm instructed not to look at, that are instructed not to look at me. I don't know these people, and the judge really is just a floor man who commentates the lawyers. So as far as the public goes, I didn't know anything about the law when this started, and yeah, I think it should reflect on the public because it is the public. But having said that, I didn't know anything about the law. So when I heard charged before I'd been charged, I thought charged actually meant guilty. Okay, so charged doesn't mean guilty at all, right? So that's how. I mean, I'm not.
Anthony, you'd had a couple of run-ins with the law by this point.
Sure. No, I had, but my my consciousness of these run-ins, due to their severity and lack of, was, these were hoops that I was jumping through for, writing on walls. I mean, that was just advertising from my actual campaign, which was, the freedom of visual speech, which actually I still, um, you know, keep to the side as far as, a mantra of the graffiti being the final frontier of true artistic integrity. But these are old lines. What we're dealing with here is the public and the court and law and the final decision. Now, in the first trial, which I'd hope to be the only trial, which I'd hope to have been 4 years earlier, which was in 2024, came to the jury was hung. So half of the charges, or most of the charges, were dismissed, and some of them still were standing. But the ones that were dismissed were things like tattooing someone without their consent. Now that was grievous bodily harm in the eyes of the law. Now, how someone tattoos someone without their consent, I don't know. but I guess it's happened in the past somehow. Regardless, to produce photographs of this, I dare say, lady, this individual sending me photographs saying I love it and things like this. These were the messages and things that damned that um, that charge. But it didn't stop the newspapers from from publishing a main feature story as titled "Tattoo Terrorist," tattoo, tattoo terror, tattooist terror, something like this. Um, so yeah, of course, that the public is going to have this residual kind of you know impression of me through these media impressions. Um, it just comes down to rumor, and it comes down to which is bad for my reputation, but the facts are the facts. The first time, the reason the jury was hung in the first case, theoretically, my team say, is because of the amount of charges. um I might add, and full disclosure and transparency, there was a trial within the trial, um which that jury didn't have to deal with, which we appointed a new jury for. So there were three juries in two trials, and the middle jury was for a drug possession and charge, which I was facing 20 years for, which I'm not sure you caught on to in any of the transcript because it was in the first trial. But I was found with 1.8 grams of liquid acid. Yeah, and so that's apparently it was worth $265,000. Blow my mind. It was apparently 9,000 hits of acid. Blow my mind, and the strongest acid that this apparent drug cop had ever seen. Now, thankfully, I got to go on the stand for that because the during the assault charges, I wasn't allowed on the stand. They wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let me on the stand. Um, Probably because I rambled too much, and I don't know why. Regardless, I went on the stand for this one, and it was just as quick. I just told the truth. I just said what it was, what I thought it was, and what it was doing there, and this guy tried every which way around the block to make me out like I was some sort of acid dealer, which is just so far from anything to do with it. So there was a lot of elements that were going on in the first trial, and that was the reason why apparently there was confusion, not confusion, but there was just a lot of debate. It must have been in the back room with the jury. The second trial, they it it made it easier for my the barrister, the second barrister that I had did the second trial in 2025, because she was dealing with, I think, two complainants or three complainants, and the charges were um, we've been through it before, and we could just streamline it, and there was no you know other things that people needed to think about. I don't know why it was so quick, but I believe I heard it was in a minute, and it was the quickest in this woman's 40-year career that they'd come back that quick. Like, we barely sat down, and they'd been given a note. Um, they were just certain that it was just like it was rubbish, and like I don't want to say anyone's situation or belief of whatever they've lived through for 5 years is rubbish, but it just wasn't factual. And whether they'd convinced themselves, each other, or they were doing it for money, I don't know. They'd have to be their own interviews, and I don't ever care to really. I don't care to see these people ever again. So I don't only be speculating, but yeah, no, it's what can I do? It's a fact. Really, if I was what they said I was, I wouldn't be here, because my lawyers aren't interested in representing dickheads that lie to them.
I was on drugs. I was fucking dealing with mad shit, eh?
What's your relationship like with drugs?
Yep, drugs and me. Well, we meet every few days in meeting rooms, and we talk about our relationship, and it's like a addiction doesn't leave you. It's something that you live with, and You know, I've got support people, and I've had problems with drugs in the past. Yeah, thankfully, currently not so much.
Your brand, the Lister brand, like I sort of said, was party boy, very much, you know, two fingers up to authority. Let's throw a TV out the window, kind of like, you know, era. And that's what street art kind of was. It was like the kind of the torch bearing from that generation of rock stars. And where does that leave you and your sort of your identity?
Well, you know, I won't be here forever, Doug, and so I would hope that I would hope that people would see my work before they see me, and that you know, not judge, I guess, judge me or critique my work, and the 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 character that's associated to the artwork. I mean, of course, it's omnipresent when you're dealing with a character or someone whose work that you like. There's been a lot of party boys and, you know, bad boys in the art world, and I think I'm mature. I know I'm maturing. So it's not like I've ever liked or disliked someone's work for being or not for being, you know, loose with their concept of authority or breaking rules. Um, but I know that I've calmed somewhat would be an understatement. But the brand, if it is known as a brand and this bad boy thing, I mean, um, I, f- I guess I've ticked the boxes. If anyone needs to see a story or hear a story, I'm just not I'm not so much, yeah, turning TVs upside down and sitting on them and, you know, living that San Francisco lifestyle anymore. It's a little more uh, a little more stable, a lot less rambunctious.
You mentioned faith a few times in here, and in one of the messages you sent me, you refer to God. What's your relationship with God? Is that a lifelong thing? Is that something that's come in throughout this process?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm a God guy. And so I wasn't raised with God. I was raised with Star Wars, and for a long time, my mother was is a passionate atheist, and would would um, would feed me religious stories as she heard them as a child through analogies of through Star Wars. So I was somewhat raised peripherally through the eyes of the Force and, you know, Siths and Jedi's, as opposed to, you know, mythological demons and spirits and angels. It came upon my life in my 30s when I stupidly, I advise strongly against ever doing a Ouija board. But I'd done that, and I did that, and that really opened my eyes to the kind of darkness that can exist when one lets that into their life. And so I leaned heavily into God with my partner at the time. I tend to refer to my Lord as my Lord, just to just, you know, to avoid any kind of specific, you know, preaching. But no, I'm a God guy. Yeah.
How did God help you through this?
Well, I give it to God, you know. If it's not mine to wear, then it's in His hands, in its hands. You know, in Western culture, you know, it's easy to fall into the, you know, rhetoric and the dialogue of talking with God, and I do fall into that in prayer. But really, how, you know, how the power has held me has just been to give it over, you know, and when I do so. You know, I feel anxiety, you know, lift off me because I don't, it's not I'm not responsible for my actions. I'm always responsible for my actions, but the actions that I don't need to wear, they're not mine, you know. So I don't I don't need to, you know, implement the 12 steps and, you know, and implement my own, you know, path for redemption. It comes, and yeah, the Lord is great, and there's a lot of power in prayer, and and good does triumph over evil, and the truth will always out. Amen.
What do you want people to understand about your story that maybe you feel has been misunderstood or misrepresented?
Wow. Well, I guess if the story of my work, which over in history, um, you know, if it so be willed by, you know, the powers that be, and by the elements of my practice and the fortitude of my sincerity in my line and my practice, and you know, for example, if I was to echo an eternity, then what one would get from my story would be my work, and that the work always comes first, and that the you know, my practice is paramount to anything to do with my character. But out of this story, if anyone was to have learned of the accusations that were laid upon me, and you know, the harsh judgment and rumors, well, I guess just to have word that that was that that was a mistake of fact, and that the truth did come out, and I am, as I've said I am and have proclaimed to be, and and I'm now cleared of all of the rubbish, and I'm back in action, and Lister Mark II is back in action.
Thank you very much for your time today.
You're very welcome, Doug.